thanks a lot for being here. It's an honor. I see many familiar faces. So what we're trying to do here is to connect all the bits and pieces of the so-called playbook of on trade, no? And it's very tough to say playbook because obviously it is because, you know, I've been working in corporate for many years before starting my own company, and one of the big reasons is that everybody gets on trade, on premise, Horeca, however we want to call it, on PowerPoint, you know. But then in reality, you know, it's very few people that really understand exactly what it means to work with bars, work with hospitality, and from the hospitality perspective, to work with brands at the same time. So there is too much theory, there is too much boardroom or meeting room discussions, focus groups, talks about reading PowerPoint, PDFs, and very little in going to the bar. I remember when I was in my previous job, sometimes it was like, you know, the marketing team would say, oh, but you know, sales never invites me to the trade, so I never go to bars. It's like, come on, you know, you don't go to bars in your free time just because you work in the industry. It's not that it's work, you know, it's, you know, just go out there and be curious, as Nicholas was saying, you know, be obsessed with, you know, back bars, menus, why a bartender is recommending a certain thing, why not, and so on. So on the way to execution, things get wrong, because whenever I'm speaking to people, I have my own podcast, Maffeo Drinks, you will see later. Whenever I bump into people, everybody agrees with what I'm saying. But then in practice, you know, very often I know that the same two people that agreed with me, they had a fight in the morning. So where do things go wrong if you agree and then you disagree? It's important to, you know, to bring people with you on board. And then this one is important, whether it's you as an employee in a company, you know, talking to the management, whether it's about, you know, talking to stakeholders in general. It can be brands to sales, sales to brands, logistics, finance, getting an investment. It's always, you know, you should take probably the finance manager with you in a bar, you know, to really explain why certain things happen. And what does a bar-brands relationship very often, you know, means? Because as Nicholas was saying, you know, the ROI is very often misunderstood, the return on investment. You know, either a purist of Excel, you know, finance type of person will just judge on how much am I giving you, how much am I getting back. But very often the brand, you know, from a brand perspective, we are, you know, often very fluffy it's like, no, it will pay back long term. This is about brand building. This is about brand awareness. We're building awareness. Who hasn't said that in a meeting or in a discussion with people? So nobody's gonna do it for you. You have to do it. You cannot just complain. And I say this to you, but I say it first to myself in the mirror every day. You know, you cannot just complain. You have to be accountable for why does that sales rep doesn't get it. Why doesn't he get it? Why doesn't she get it? Because you have to explain it. You know, and regardless how busy we are, we have to be accountable. And if you have done everything, all the homework that you could do to make them understand, then you will make ultimately your life easier. There is one thing in general that has shifted in this industry. You know, the industry has always been it hasn't evolved that much. You know, ultimately it's still about moving cases, you know, from a warehouse, from a distillery to a warehouse, to a bar, to a supermarket chain, But what has changed is that now there's a myriad of brands that were not there 10, 20, 30 years ago. So things have dramatically changed in that side. And from a big brand point of view, you know, whether you work for a big brands or for a smaller brands cannot really own bars anymore. And I say with, you know, in brackets, because it's like you used to walk into a bar and you could see, you know, who was the main company that they were working with. Now, it doesn't work like this anymore. You go into a bar and you cannot dissect what that back bar looks like, because there are a myriad of brands, small players, bigger players. different distributors, different wholesalers that bring them bottles. So there is a pressure from, that small guy over there. It's a bartender, it's a bar manager, it's a distributor. It's all of us working in the ecosystem that are pushed by brand 1, 2, 3, 4 to say, sell my brand, sell my brand, sell more of my brand. And it's very difficult to actually understand that people have to work with many brands because it's about their credibility. If that person over there is a bartender, the bartender must be able to talk, to work, and to sell many different bottles from many different players. They cannot sell one portfolio from one company because then they will lose their credibility. So it's important to put ourselves in their shoes as brand owners, but at the same time, from a bar perspective, bartender, bar manager perspective, to put ourselves into the brand owner or the distributor's shoes to really say, okay, I want to work with different brands, but how much is too much kind of thing, Because when I see bartenders working for different companies, and I love it, then all of a sudden I see their Instagram and they are saying that this gin is the best gin, and then the second day, the second gin is the best gin. And then it's so how do we do it in a credible way so that we can keep the relationship with everybody and avoid these kind of arguments between, oh, I saw that I thought you were working with us and now you're working with the others, So how do we make this happen? So choosing the right brand for your bar is crucially important. And now I played with a little bit of a drawing there. There should probably be another green arrow there in the bottom right. But, we tend, as bartender, because I discussed this with many bartenders, with many bar managers, very often it's about, I'm doing a menu and where it's, again, legal to be supported by brands on cocktail menus, they tend to default to a brand that may not actually match their values, but match their budget, which is the hard reality sometimes, that you may go with the person that actually has more money than another person, another sales rep, just because that sales rep has money. And my question, and I throw it out there, is how sustainable is actually that? How can we do it in a way that we align it more with brand values, and obviously, hopefully, also with budgets, because bars are businesses, as we were talking before. We need to make money, and we all need to make money. As Nicolas spotted, that everybody wants to make more money here. So, but how do we do it in a, without kind of like jumping left and right and jumping on, oh, sorry, that was last year, but this year, this other brand stepped in and they gave me this much money. So sorry, your gin, your vodka, your tequila is out of the menu because now we work with those guys. At the same time, there is another issue that I see traveling mainly Europe these days is, when there is this relationship between brands and bars, it's very important to understand what's the thin line in between kind of like too much, and good enough. So brands want to work with outlets that can deliver value, can deliver ROI, and can enable those kind of conversations that are uncomfortable conversations that I often have in offices with finance directors. Because all of a sudden, when I am the one paying for a guest shift on behalf of some brands, I'm the one who gets, I don't want to swear, but, issues, on, why are we sponsored this thing? It almost looks like a conflict of interest. It's like, why did you give that money to that bar? And I cannot explain it in a way that, because long-term is very good for brand building in city X, Y, Z, So we have to understand what is a good partnership in terms of what, Nidal was saying before, lists, accolades, competition, victories should be the byproduct of everything we do correctly, whether we are bartenders, whether we are brand owners, whether we are whatever we are in the drinks ecosystem, best distributor of the year or whatever. we need to be able to do that in a sense that, okay, that's, by the way, I won. Thank you, guys. You know? But very often I see bars focusing too much on getting on a list. You know, oh, we want to get on, we want to do guest shifts because we want to get on the list, on the list. So that's why we're asking for listing fees. And it's like, no, your ultimate thing is about doing good hospitality, enhanced hospitality, rather than being on the list. That's not the end goal. That's the byproduct of doing everything well. And at the same time, I throw it out there to bartenders. I'm not bartender, but all these things about distillery visits, guest shifts, sponsorships, traveling, sometimes it gets very transactional. It's like, oh, I work with this brand because they make me travel the world. Because they send me to Australia, they send me to Hong Kong, they send me to Singapore, they send me to London, they send me to Sydney. It's not about that. How about those values? Do they align with you? What are you doing for that brand? And what are you actually giving back to that brand? So how do we all get money from it so that the brand owner can choose the right bar for the right investment? Because especially in a very capital challenged time like we are living now, there's not unlimited money here from brands to sponsor this game of guest shifts and investments and distillery trips and voyages and so on. So is it sustainable there when you as a bartender, for example, you travel on brand's money, but actually you're focusing primarily on your personal brand rather than on giving back to the brand that actually enabled that trip? From a bar perspective, you charge a listing fee, and then maybe sometimes there's not even a mention of the brand name. There is gin instead of calling it my gin. Is that sustainable when I gave you 2,000 euros and actually I don't even see, and I bring the managing director of the company I work there, and it's like, no, I have this cocktail, it's with our gin. It's like, yeah, but I see gin. Yeah, no, but it's our gin, don't worry, like, trust me, they told me it's my gin. At the same time, from a brand perspective, you fund programs, you fund guest shifts, you fund trips, and sometimes you don't even show up. I've been to guest shifts where I was the only one from a brand, and people, the brand manager that's actually signing off the invoice for that trip, for that guest shift, doesn't even show up and doesn't even shake hands with that bartender that they have enabled with their budget. How short-circuited is that, when we do that, And at the same time, from both a bar's and brand's perspective, it's about wholesalers, distributors. Let's not forget, who's bringing the actual bottle. Because when you end up out of stock because there is not enough bottles of that brand that was doing the guest shift, it's because you didn't tell the sales rep and you didn't order those bottles because those people were out of stock and they didn't know that there was an activation happening in the trade. So, it's about so many moving parts, and how do we do, let's say, less but better to actually making a relationship sustainable for real. So in today's, we spoke about AI, we spoke about, technology, and, IT is very actual at this time. And back when I was in high school, I used to do informatica, was called back in Italy. It's like if then that's, if then else, repeat until, if this then that, So how about if we, if a brand pays 2K, okay, the bar trains the staff, explains what it is, let's track the sales velocity, give me some numbers that I can sell back to my internal stakeholders, finance director, sales director, and so on. If a brand funds a trip, have the bartender showcasing, really the partnership. Like, let's commit to something. Okay, I'm gonna sell this much for you. Always bearing in mind the legal implication of this. Like, let's not get me wrong. at the same time, like, let's reinvest. You know, like I was recently in a guest shift, and it was a best practice for me that, you know, a brand had paid to get in, and then at the end of the year of the contract, we had actually a call from the bar manager saying, "Hey, there's still some money here that we haven't used. How about we do something together?" You know, that is I call it a best practice, because it's really about not milking the money of the brand, that nobody in this messy situation, nobody would have noticed that those money were missing. But in a honest partnership and relationship, that guy called and said, let's do it together, you know? And then, you know, that brings some real value in next year relationship, because then it's like, you know, I really want to partner with these guys. They're really walking the talk. And again, from a distributor perspective, you know, if you get as a distributor some support to actually work with a brand, you know, make sure that the sales team has got KPIs, you know, that go back to the strategy, that go back to the target that we've actually set with that brand. Otherwise, we just like end up and get lost. Here you can scan the code, and you can listen to my podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit the subscribe button to keep up with the latest beverage alcohol industry insights from Park Street University.